Most people believe that success begins with resources. They think you need capital, connections, or credentials. But that's not where real success starts. It starts with vision. The people who go on to do remarkable things, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the leaders we admire, didn't begin with more money. They began with more clarity. They weren't focused on what they didn't have. They were obsessed with where they were going. It's a mistake we make all the time. We look at successful people and assume they had a head start, but look closer. Strip away the results and you'll find someone who started with nothing but an idea, a belief, a vision so clear, so compelling, it pulled them forward when everything else told them to turn around. That's the difference. A person with a vision will always outperform someone with just resources. Why? Because resources can run out. But a vision, that's fuel that never expires. Let me tell you a quick story. There's a woman I met years ago. She had a dream of creating a community space for underserved youth, a place where they could learn, feel safe, and be mentored. She had no funding, no building, and no political support. Nothing. But she had clarity. She had a vision so sharp it cut through every excuse, every barrier. She started with one folding table under a tree. That's all. No building, just space. And every afternoon, a few kids would come. She taught them. She listened to them. And more kept coming. Eventually, she got a small grant. Then someone donated a room. Then a local paper covered her story. Fast forward to today, and she runs one of the most respected youth development organizations in her city. She didn't wait for resources. She started with a vision, and that vision attracted the resources, not the other way around. See, when you know what you're building, people want to help. When you stand for something, you become a magnet. Vision isn't about having all the answers. It's about having something worth answering for. Most people get it backward. They say, once I have more time, I'll start. Or once I get some money, I'll try. Because readiness doesn't come from what you have. It comes from knowing what matters. We are taught to chase security before clarity. But what happens when you get everything you thought you needed and still feel lost? I've seen executives with million-dollar salaries who feel empty. I've seen startups raise huge amounts of funding only to collapse because the founders had no compass, no why. You don't need a map when you have a clear destination. You just need to start walking. Think about every invention, every movement, every breakthrough. They all started with someone seeing something that didn't exist yet, someone looking at a blank wall and imagining a window. That's vision. It doesn't take a miracle to think big. It takes courage, the courage to see a better future and say, I believe this is possible, even if no one else does yet. The reason most people never start is because they confuse vision with perfection. They think they need to have every detail figured out before they begin. But clarity isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing the direction. Imagine you're in a dense fog. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. But in the distance, there's a faint light. That light is your vision. You don't need to see the entire path. You just need to keep moving toward the light. That's how the most extraordinary journeys begin. One uncertain step at a time, guided by something you believe in. We live in a culture that glorifies the finished product. We see the mansion, the lifestyle, the influence, but we rarely see the origin story. We don't see the lonely nights, the risks, the rejections. And that's dangerous because it convinces people that success is about access, not belief. But the truth is, people with vision get up earlier. They try harder. They stay later, not because they want to. Vision isn't motivation, it's obsession. And that obsession is what makes the difference. So if you're waiting for more to start, stop waiting. The greatest leaders, the greatest creators, they didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait until they were rich. They thought big and started small. And most importantly, they didn't try to be impressive. They tried to be intentional. Let that sink in. This world doesn't need more people chasing approval. It needs more people chasing purpose. When you find your vision, when you define your why, everything changes. You'll speak differently, walk differently, work differently. Because now it's not just about what you're doing, it's about what you're building. I don't care how old you are, where you're from, or what you think is missing. If you have a clear vision, you're already ahead of most people. Your job isn't to convince the world that your dream is possible. Your job is to believe in it so fiercely that the world has no choice but to pay attention. You don't need to be rich to act like the rich. You need to think like them. And thinking like them means starting with vision, not resources. Because resources are found. But vision is forged. And once you have that, no one can take it from you. We live in a culture obsessed with the big moment. We glorify breakthroughs, viral success, million-dollar launches, and overnight fame. But what we fail to talk about, what really matters, is the small, almost invisible steps that came before any of it. Big things don't just happen, they're built, and they're built slowly. When we see someone who's achieved something remarkable, we often say they're lucky, or they must be naturally talented, or they had the right connection. But those are excuses. They're comfortable lies we tell ourselves to avoid the harder truth that anyone who's built something meaningful did it by showing up consistently even when no one was watching. There's a man I once met who ran a global nonprofit that impacted millions of lives. But when I asked him how it started, he smiled and said, "With a borrowed laptop on my kitchen table." That's it. No office, no staff, no big donors, just an idea and a decision to begin. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait for conditions to be perfect. He started small, ridiculously small. But what made the difference wasn't the scale of his start. It was the discipline to keep showing up. Every day, making a call, writing an email, helping one more person, just one more. We overestimate what we can do in a week, and we underestimate what we can do in a year. Because the truth is, momentum is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It grows slowly beneath the surface. And then one day you look up and realize everything changed. But it didn't change in that moment. It changed in all the little moments no one saw. Most people never begin because they feel like what they can do today is too small to matter. That's the trap. That's the lie. If you want to write a book, start with one sentence. If you want to run a business, start with one customer. If you want to build confidence, start by keeping one promise to yourself. That's how it works. The problem is small steps are boring. They're not sexy. They don't go viral, and that's why most people ignore them. They're too busy chasing big leaps. But the big leap doesn't come until the small steps earn it. People love to say, go big or go home, but I'd argue the opposite. Go small, but keep going. That's what separates people who dream from people who build. Small steps build habits. Habits build character. And character sustains success. Because here's the thing. Even if you somehow stumble into a big win without doing the work, you won't know how to keep it. And you'll lose it just as fast. Skill doesn't come from the win. It comes from the climb. I've spoken to CEOs who run billion-dollar companies. I've talked to artists who've won awards, athletes who've stood on podiums, and every single one of them can trace their success back to an unglamorous beginning. They didn't start with mastery. They started with commitment. One foot in front of the other, over and over again. They didn't ask, how fast can I get there? They asked, how can I keep showing up? That's the mindset. You want to think like the rich, like the powerful, like the impactful? Think long term. Think in daily disciplines, not dramatic moves. Real wealth, real success isn't built in a day. It's built daily. And it's not about intensity. It's about consistency. They give up too soon. Not because they aren't capable, but because they don't trust the process. They don't believe that the little things matter. But they do. The richest people in the world didn't save millions in 1 year. They invested small amounts for years, and they kept going. The best relationships aren't built on grand romantic gestures. They're built on showing up daily with attention, with presence, with kindness. Excellence is not a result. It's a practice. You don't suddenly become someone who wins. You become someone who shows up, learns, adjusts, and grows. And the win becomes inevitable. Small steps aren't glamorous, but they are powerful because they teach you patience. They teach you humility. And they teach you that you don't have to control everything. You just have to control your effort. Think big, of course. Dream bigger than anyone thinks is reasonable. But then zoom all the way in and ask, what's the next small move I can make today? That's how movements start. That's how legends are born. One act of courage, one phone call, one uncomfortable decision, one more rep, one more page, one more day. And over time, those small steps compound into a result that looks impossible until you trace it all the way back to the beginning. And you realize it was just one person who decided to take the first step. Let that person be you. Let today be the day you stop waiting for the big break and start building the small foundation. Because small steps build big things. Always. There's a difference between looking successful and being successful. And too often we confuse the two. We scroll through social media and see the cars, the watches, the vacations, the polished images of what we think wealth looks like. And in that moment, something inside us says, that's it. That's the goal. We don't question it. We don't ask where it comes from. We just assume that if we mimic the outer layer, we'll eventually arrive at the inner reality. But here's the truth. The lifestyle is a byproduct. The mindset is the foundation. You can buy the clothes, drive the car, speak the lingo, and still be broke, still be lost. Because the outer markers mean nothing without the inner structure to hold them up. See, acting like the rich isn't about copying their lifestyle. It's about understanding how they think. The wealthy, truly wealthy, not just financially, but emotionally and mentally, don't see life as a chase for approval. They play a different game, a longer game, a quieter game. They don't ask, how can I impress people today? They ask, how can I make decisions that compound over decades? They don't obsess over looking important. They focus on being effective. That's the shift. That's the difference. Real wealth isn't loud. It's disciplined. It's strategic. And most of all, it's internal. You can't see someone's thought process in a photo. You can't feel someone's patience, their risk tolerance, their ability to delay gratification just by watching what they post. But those are the traits that build empires. People with a rich mindset are builders. They think in systems. They think in seasons. They understand that some seasons are for planting, others are for pruning, and some are just for waiting. They're not trying to win fast, they're trying to win right. And that takes a different kind of discipline. Because this world constantly tempts us with shortcuts. It tells us to fake it till you make it. It rewards appearances over substance. But the people who last, The people who rise and stay up are the ones who chose structure over flash. One of the wealthiest men I ever met once told me, "I made my first million thinking like a poor man. I made my second by learning how the rich think." That line stuck with me because for many of us, we grow up learning to survive, not to scale. We're taught to look for security, not strategy. So when we see someone living with freedom, time freedom, financial freedom, creative freedom, we try to copy their results, not their reasoning. But the real value is in how they think. It's in how they solve problems, not avoid them. How they see opportunity where others see risk. How they invest in learning, relationships, and resilience. Not just things. You want to act like the rich? Start by mastering your attention, your energy, your time. The richest people I know have strict boundaries. Not because they're rude, but because they know their time is their greatest asset. They don't say yes to every invite, every opportunity, every shiny new distraction. They say yes to the things that align with their vision. Everything else is noise. They're also deeply curious. They read. They listen. They ask better questions. They don't assume they know everything, even when they've achieved success, especially when they've achieved success. Because the rich mindset is a student mindset. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment you start losing ground. The moment you think you're too good to go back to the basics is the moment you stop growing. So many people want the results without the repetition. But the truth is, the people who live with wealth, freedom, and influence, they've repeated the fundamentals more times than anyone else. They manage their emotions, they manage their expectations, they manage themselves. It's not about being cold or calculated. It's about being intentional, deliberate, purpose-driven. Because success without structure collapses under pressure. And lifestyle without mindset always leads to burnout. We need to stop chasing symbols and start cultivating substance. You can't fake mindset. You can mimic lifestyle for a while, but eventually the truth shows up. When stress hits, when setbacks come, when the applause fades, that's when mindset speaks louder than image. So the challenge isn't to look successful, it's to become the kind of person success can trust. Let me say that again. Become the kind of person success can trust. Because wealth doesn't just show up. It's attracted to clarity, to discipline, to consistency. If you want to act like the rich, start thinking like a builder. Start behaving like a steward. Start living like someone who's preparing for legacy. Not just lifestyle. It's not always glamorous. It's not always fast, but it's always worth it. Because the day will come when the lifestyle matches the mindset. When the external finally reflects the internal, and when it does, it'll be real, sustainable, earned, and no one can take that from you. We are addicted to now, to speed, to the shortcut. We want immediate results, instant progress, quick validation. But anything truly meaningful, anything that lasts, takes time. And not just time, it takes a mindset that can endure time. That's the long game. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're impatient. They think if it doesn't happen in 6 months, it was never meant to be. If the post doesn't go viral, it wasn't worth writing. If the product doesn't sell out immediately, the idea must be broken. But real growth doesn't follow a calendar. It follows a pattern of commitment, refinement, resilience, and time. The most successful people I've met don't chase fast wins. They build strong foundations. They don't ask, what can I get today? They ask, what am I building that will matter 10 years from now? That's the shift. We've been sold the myth that success should be quick. And if it's not, something's wrong. But think about anything in nature. A tree doesn't grow overnight. It's not even visible at first. Its strength, its roots are buried deep before anything breaks the surface. The same is true for us. I once sat with a business owner who had quietly built a company over 25 years. No spotlight, no headlines, but his people loved working for him. His customers kept coming back, and his legacy was undeniable. When I asked him the secret, he smiled and said, "I just kept showing up. I played the long game when everyone else quit early." That sentence stuck with me, because the truth is, the long game isn't glamorous, it's not dramatic, it's not the stuff of viral videos, it's quiet, it's repetitive, it's hard, but it's also where the real magic lives. The long game is what builds character. It reveals who you are when no one's clapping. It forces you to focus on process instead of praise, and that's where mastery happens. We live in a world that's constantly measuring output. How many followers do you have? How much revenue did you make this month? How quickly are you scaling? But the people playing the long game ask different questions. They ask, am I getting better? Am I more aligned today than I was yesterday? Am I building something I still want to be part of 10 years from now? They're not distracted by comparison. They're committed to progress. And that commitment changes everything. Because when you're playing the long game, you stop reacting and start designing. You stop trying to keep up and start thinking independently. You stop looking at your competitors and start focusing on your customers, your team, your mission, your future. Playing the long game means being willing to go unnoticed for a while. It means choosing integrity over popularity, sustainability over scale, substance over speed. That's a hard choice to make in a culture that rewards noise. But every empire that stood the test of time was built slowly. Every leader you admire went through seasons of obscurity. They didn't panic. They didn't pivot every time things felt slow. They stayed with it, they refined, they adjusted, but they never abandoned the core. Because they weren't chasing attention. They were building momentum. There's a story I love. It's about a pottery class. One half of the class was told they'd be graded solely on the quantity of pots they made. The other half would be graded on the single pot, but it had to be perfect. At the end of the course, it was the group focused on quantity that produced the best pots. Why? Because they were taking action, they were learning through repetition. They weren't chasing perfection. They were embracing the process. That's the long game. It's not about getting it perfect today. It's about showing up enough times that excellence becomes inevitable. The long game doesn't require brilliance, it requires endurance. And it's not just about business or success, it's about life. Relationships thrive when we play the long game. When we choose to work through hard seasons instead of walking away. Health improves when we focus on daily habits, not quick fixes. Confidence grows when we build it over time, through small wins and promises kept to ourselves. Everything meaningful responds to long-term effort. But the hardest part about the long game is that it often looks like nothing is happening. You put in the work, you stay consistent, and for weeks, maybe months, there's silence. No reward, no applause. That's where most people quit, not because they're weak, but because they're unsure, uncertain whether the effort is working. But the ones who trust the process, who believe in the unseen progress, they're the ones who wake up one day and realize they've built something remarkable. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers, invisible, daily, persistent layers. And that's how greatness is built. So the question isn't, how fast can I succeed? The question is, am I willing to keep going when no one's watching? Because there will be days when it feels like you're behind.